Good morning. Good morning. Happy Black History Month. We are here with the level set, first Saturday of the month, and we thank you for spending some time with us. We have a number of issues that are pressing this morning, but we'd like to hone down on a few things. With respect, we're going to start giving honor and the attention due to Carter G. Woodson, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who initially founded and crafted Black History Week that evolved over several years into Black History Month. There are a number, as many of you all already know, there are a number of misstatements about the actual genesis of the month in which Black history has been celebrated in the week and so forth. And we hope to add to the conversation. We know we don't have all the information. We hope to add to it this morning. With no further ado, I am honored to introduce Dr. Charles Alexander, and as we engage in this conversation this morning.
Morning, Attorney Fields.
Good morning, Doctor.
Yeah, so we just want to kind of, as we do, we want to level set, and we want, we want to remind some, our regular listeners, and then those of you who are new to the show and maybe even new to the topic. We just need to know. We just need for people to have the baseline data, so we got a level set. And so we oftentimes hear people, talk about, Black History Month ain't enough for me. I don't celebrate it because my history is longer than that. And they go, how they just gonna give us a month, and they choose the shortest month, and because we associate, it's amazing that for many people, their concept of Black History Month lacks agency. Right. And
that's correct.
And it suggests that, we don't have agency. We don't have thoughts about us, and that there is literally no way that this could have occurred free of some, beneficent act of white folks. Now, first and foremost, is wrong. But second of all, where in history would we find the model for that? Like, where would we find, that, God? So I got to struggle with how we even, arrive at that. But I again, for those who are new, I'm a clinical psychologist, so there's very few things that that we do that I can't find a way to connect with the trauma response. And so that would be one of them. The fact that we struggle, we struggle in places like this. I've often said, again, for many of us, we are literally ahistorical. And for many of us, we intentionally distance ourselves from the past because it's difficult for us to conceptualize and reconcile, our traumatic past. And so, and we want to harken back to some mythological space when it was all good and we were this, that, or the other. When in reality, we've been in this battle for thousands of years. Right. And so to try to go beyond or skip, what we call the modern day civil rights movement, to skip the nadir, that period between Reconstruction and the modern civil rights movement, Reconstruction, slavery, in the Middle Passage, to skip all of that, to jump back to this time where where we think that all was good on the continent, you probably don't know where to land, right? If you're searching for that, if you're searching for that, this purity, you probably don't know where to land. So, but all of that to say, because of that, it makes it difficult for us to, honestly, uh, process what we have and what we had and what we have. So what we had in the person of Dr. Carter G. Woodson and what we have in Black History Month. And so what we have to know off the bat is that Dr. Woodson started this in 1926, and that's not where he started, right? And so Dr. Woodson was, dedicated to, to study of, of Black people, Negro people. This is what he was doing, and he was studying and teaching. And so one of the things that we really don't appreciate, that we really kind of struggle with, and I kind of, it's always interesting to me to listen to folks today, talk crazy about what's going on in Florida. It's really interesting for me to have conversations with folks from St. Louis who talk crazy about Florida and book banning, when book banning is is worse in Missouri than it is in Florida. But you got to know that to say that. But to even have that conversation as if we haven't been here before, but you got to deal with the historical legacy in order to have that conversation, right? So you have to go back to, it was illegal for us to be taught to read or write. We are literally sneaking to learn, and we're reading whatever we can possibly get our hands on in order to do this, because it was illegal for us to learn.
Well, in many spots, there were boats that were purchased where Black students were taught, because you could not learn on the shores of those specific places.
Well, we had a freedom school in the middle of the Mississippi. You had a freedom school between St. Louis and East St. Louis. Robert Meacham, taught Black folks how to read out in the middle of the Mississippi River. And so,
and what's so galling is, folks, some people can't tell you the last time they read a book. That's the issue that we really need to be concerned with.
And we just need to read, right? Yes. And so, and it can be a book. You can start with a book. You can start with a magazine. You can start with the paper. You can read online. I mean, there's print all kind of places. And so the issue is that you start to read, and once you pick up that habit, then that starts to kind of influence, your preferred content, and da 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 da. Next thing you know, guess what you're learning? And so Dr. Woodson was gathering this information because there's, we talk about they not teaching our kids now, and we need to get away from that, because again, why would you suspect that they would teach our kids? And so we have to have a plan for that. And that's what Carter G. Woodson put in motion. He put in motion that that source material, that, the history. He put that stuff in the hands of Black educators. And as he continued to amass things and share and grow this movement nationwide, wherever there were Black children and Black educators, he was sending this information. In 1926, it comes to mind that we need to have a Negro History Week, not to celebrate. The purpose of Negro History Week is not to celebrate our history for a week. That was not the purpose of it. So again, we got to level set. Stop having these random wrong conversations and spreading misinformation and disinformation. Now, so what's the difference? So misinformation is you just really might not know. You got well intentions, but you know you just haven't sourced well. So you might have gone and actually researched this to find out, why we have, you know, Negro History Week, and then how it got to be a month, and you just might have, again, just might not have been well sourced, right? And so now you're kind of walking around spewing misinformation. Now, then there's disinformation. Disinformation is intentional uh, spread of factually inaccurate and wrong information. That's disinformation. And so we're vulnerable to those things. And we have people stand up and they say, and they gave us the shortest moment. All of that falls in the realm of that misinformation and disinformation. So the purpose of Negro History Week at its onset was not to celebrate Black history for a week. It was to recognize everything that we had learned over the course of the year as he was pushing out this information, as he and his organization, the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, which is now the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, as they were pushing out this information to Black scholars and Black teachers all over the United States so that they could educate children and adults. And so the purpose of the week in its genesis was a celebration of the past year's work. Level set.
Plain and simple. That's it. So let's make sure that we hone that down. Last year, I heard a national radio person, a contributor, state that Black History Month was started by Carter G. Woodson so we could show the mainstream society what we were doing. Well, it was not. It was not the exact definition, the exact reasoning for Black History Week has just been enunciated by Dr. Charles Alexander. Understand that. This was for us, and this was essentially, it was a level set for the prior year. This is what we learned last year. This is where we are. So this is what we know. And now moving forward, we're going to do this.
This, that, or the other.
And
yes.
that. So understand that this is our month really to take stock and what we have learned, what we've accomplished in the prior year. So, what were the goals in the beginning of the year? Voters' rights, employment, increased wages, housing, healthcare, so forth. Where are we? What we do in education. So now's the time to take our blood pressure with respect to those things. And this is a fight, a war. So you're not going to win on all fronts. Take an assessment and let's move on. We need to do that individually. The thing that I love very, very, one of the things, I cannot tell you the thing that I love most about Dr. Woodson. I can't tell you. The thing that I love most about Dr. Woodson, and I'd like to get your opinion, Dr. Alexander, I don't think that there was another prominent leader that loved Black folks like Dr. Woodson. I think that there are people that did, but that loved us. But for my money, I do not think that there was anyone that was more committed, that had more faith, that had more stock in Black folks than Dr. Carter G. Woodson. And I say that because as you look and you analyze his writings were at the same time motivating, chastising, and supportive. He'd tell you in one breath, you need to, nobody's going to respect you until you respect yourself. And in the next breath, he'd tell you, you've got everything you need to do. You don't need anyone else. This is the sort of background. This is the sort of teaching that he amassed. And he had done extensive research, scientific research. So there's nothing that he's stating in a vacuum. So, yeah, but the issue with respect, he goes down and he speaks to what every single professional should be doing year in and year out. He states, he states how attorneys, and I'll just take my craft. It's your job to be more entrenched in research and law than you have. And the Negro attorney at times, and as he states in Miseducation of the Negro attorney at times is faulted at that. And we've got to do a better job of that. And these are the sort of assessments that we all have to take annually.
I sometimes I am able to tell if people have actually read a book by the quotes that they use in referencing the writer, right? And it's very rare. It's very rare that I talk to somebody about Dr. Woodson and they talk to me about their what he said about their profession. So like what you just did, that's a rare occurrence. Most people who talk to me or that I hear talking about Dr. Woodson say something about, if there is no door, if there's no black door, no back door or whatever, we'll go, that whole thing about the back door, and, we'll find it or something,
Right.
It's got a whole book that's an analysis of what we're doing, how long we've been doing it, why we do it this way, and what we should do better. That's what the book is about.
Right. And
it's not just it's not just about it's not just about. So when he's talking about the miseducation, he's talking about the inputs and the outputs,
right,
across disciplines,
across
so if you're
significant
not taught,
discipline.
yes, if you're not taught in a way that is, so he's not using the phrase African-centered thought. That's what he's talking about. So if you're not taught in a way that reflects African-centered thought, then when you go out into the world, into your professional life, you won't do things on behalf of Black people.
Right.
Because you haven't been taught in a way that, that is intended to nurture and enhance Black thought. And so if you don't have that, you might be a doctor, but you're going to be a poor doctor.
That's correct.
You're not going to be, meaning you're not going to be able to serve your people.
Right.
If you don't have that, you're going to be a poor attorney.
That's correct.
Meaning that you can't serve your people. And so it's rare that I come across folks who've read the book, kind of beyond that. And so thank you for sharing that. But again, that's kind of what we're talking about, is that because you got to have that context to understand why we had a Negro History Week. Now, so why did he choose when he chose? He chose the 7th through the 14th, right? So right. Why the 7th through the 14th? All right, let's go back. Why February? So February, not because it was cold, not because it was the shortest month, not because that's what white folks said we could do. He chose February because he thought two of the most important people in the lives of Black people, as far as he was concerned, were Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. Abraham Lincoln's birthday, I believe, is the 12th, and Frederick Douglass didn't know when he was born. So he selected a day. And so he selected as his birthday February 14, 1818, I believe. But I know it was the 14th. I'm just not sure on the year. But I think that's what he selected as his birthday, just like he selected his name. His name was Frederick Bailey, but that was that was Master's name. And so he didn't want Bailey. So he wanted a different name. And he chose that name, I believe, after he, stole himself. Because he was a felon. right?
Right. He was,
He was
yeah,
selling,
I think
and
he
so
walked away from the
yeah,
plantation. What
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
man does that?
and and he had prayed and prayed for freedom, but God didn't listen until he started praying with his feet. But he left off them hands because he gave a man a two-piece before he got up out of there. So he put it on my man, and then he fled. He gets to he ultimately gets to New York, and I think that was Ruggles. I think it was Ruggles who is one of the people who takes care of him. Um, Incidentally, we need to our conceptualization of the Underground Railroad needs to grow beyond Harriet Tubman. Not minimizing Harriet Tubman. Calm down, Black folks. I'm saying she's not the Underground Railroad. She is literally a conductor. She's not even the most proficient conductor.
Right.
She did what she did, but there were many people, and this is a whole network, and it existed all over the place. So, but I digress. So he gets there and he tries to, so it's in New York where he's trying to make sure that, he's able to remain free and this, that, or the other. He's encouraged to change his name. He chooses Douglas. So, but that's how we get Black History Week or Negro History Week, is because Carter G. Woodson wanted to recognize what we have been doing all year, what we have been studying, what were our goals for the year? Did we achieve our goals? What are our goals for next year? It was, to your point, Negro History Week was level set. That's what it was. That's how I started. And then over the course of time, as it, took shape and took hold, it was always a community and educationally based thing. Why? Why do we know that? Because where did he go first to kind of jump this off? He went to the Qs, right? So he's a member of Omega Psi Phi. He goes to his fraternity and he said, "Hey, y'all, let's do this." And so,
Actually, Doc, when they approached him for honor, because obviously he was out of undergrad when Omega Psi Phi was founded, but when they approached him to become an honorary member, he said he would, with one caveat: you all help my organization. And to their credit, I will, I will always have fondness for all of the Divine Nine. But the Omega is number one for Carter G. Woodson. I think he's one of the greatest men to walk the face of the earth. Number two, their support for him. To this day, they man his house on occasions, and they allowed him. One of the things that Dr. Woodson did was he sold his subscriptions door to door. He hired students to do it. Students would sell those subscriptions. He would then, give them scholarship money and so forth. But the Omegas helped do that throughout the country. So,
and I think another, you mentioned the subscriptions and the door-to-door work, and literally talking about the Qs, boots on the ground, is that he wasn't no bought and sold Negro.
and see that
And
right there,
so
Doc.
he
That right
raised
there.
money from this was a Black, and that's why that's the other reason why we have to level set, and we got to get away from this. This is what they gave us. Carter G. Woodson did this out of his house, and he did this with his meager resources, and then he starts to sell subscriptions, and then uh, when the folks came saying we'll support your efforts, he's like, you gonna support this or not? Because I'm not changing, right? And so when
And
people
folks,
started to come
let's be very clear about who those
yes.
folks are.
So
Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation,
yes,
those the same folks that buy and sell public academicians today.
yes,
He turned around. We had this conversation last week about the routes we take. with this very conversation about the routes we take in terms of being free and helping our folks. And Carter G. Woodson is the roadmap.
And so there's a book called the White Architects of Black Education. It's a very good book. And so it talks about those folks, those folks that you mean. So all of those foundations, Carnegie Mellon, Rockefellers, all that kind of stuff, they gave and they continue to give, and some of them, I suppose, to the HBCUs. And so there's some, random smart dude on social media like, oh, I got one for you. Hot take. Spelman, named after white women. Howard, named after white man. Morehouse, all these HBCU. Like, all right, brother.
Right. Okay, good.
I'm glad you knew. I'm glad you knew that because
we knew that when we went there.
We all knew that. So, and so, but but that was this book, White Architects of Black Education. It kind of lays out all of that. And so all of those, that wasn't just philanthropic good deeds. The intent in that is to shape and craft and to borrow one of your favorite attorney, to curate a certain kind of Negro for, for a workforce for those titans. Because those philanthropic organizations were attached to industry. They were attached to oil and steel, and the railroads. That's eventually, automotives and rubber and all that kind of stuff. Literally, it's kind of how they wash their money, right? And created, a particular type of workforce, right? And so Carter G. Woodson said, I will not be bought. This is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to do it. And so there's a book about Carter G. called Fugitive Pedagogy. And it really speaks to how he built this nationwide network, and how we filtered information out, and everybody got information so that we could teach and learn. Because one of the other things that we also get wrong, most of this is just because we just don't understand. We're not trying to be wrong. We just don't understand. So even when we're looking at the HBCUs, when we look at historically, we talk about whatever Black schools that we had, primary and secondary schools that we had. In most cases, if they existed, they were, they weren't Black funded. They were, state and local funded, and their curriculums were dictated by the white folks. And so when the author says, fugitive pedagogy, it was literally that. It was in the 20s and 30s and 40s. They were literally sneaking content, into these schools and classrooms. And you would have kids with their, Dick and Jane reader in front of them with some Carter G information inside, so that when the principal walked by, it looked like they're reading the standard issue, school curriculum. But in reality, they're reading information from, Carter G's organization. That's what was necessary, right? And we're not talking about that's what was necessary, during the enslavement of Africans. We're talking about that's what was necessary in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, probably 60s, and even today. That clearly there are places where you gotta sneak the curriculum in because of the forces are against self-knowledge, right? And we know, we can find those forces. We can go back, justification during the enslavement of Africans, education would make the African unfit for slavery. So we can't educate them. Well, they think the same now.
It's the exact same.
And so
exact same.
So, so the reason why the reason why we can't over respond to the DeSantis or to the knuckleheads in Missouri is because we've been here before. What's our phrase, Larry? Pattern recognition.
Pattern
right?
recognition.
We've been here before, and we had a solution before. And so instead of us continuously saying, if you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it. Okay, well, let's learn it. Let's stop just saying it. Let's do it. And so let's not over respond and overreact. Let's just have a response. We have a response. We know what to do. So we don't have to spend time arguing, debating the white supremacists. He's a white supremacist. So we know what his motivation is. His motivation has nothing to do with any good for us. So why not just appreciate that he's shown himself so we know exactly who the enemy is? So let's then go back into the annals and find, okay, so what did the ancestors, we always like to say, as we are ancestors, wildest dreams. So let's confer with the ancestors. Let's see what the ancestors had for this. Take that, put a little of that on them, and see what that gets us, as opposed to, floundering in these spaces. And so, but that's what you get with Carter G. And so the thing grows. All of these different places start to do their own thing with it. They start to craft it the way that they want to. And so it had, in the 60s, there were places that were already celebrating a Black History Month. Right, because it's just that much content that they wanted to cover. And so it was, again, that wasn't white folks, that was us. That was people taking ownership of the concept and doing it in the manner that they felt was right for wherever they were. And then finally we get into, I think it's like 76 or whatever. I don't know, I don't feel like looking it up.
You're right, it's 1976.
And and so then what? Ford, I think.
Right.
Ford, makes it into this recognizable national recognition type of thing, Black History Month. And then from that point forward, Negroes who don't read start saying, the white man gave us this. And so that's so I understand how we start thinking wrong, but we don't have to stay there. We can level set. And so now we know that this is really how it came about. This was not some, gift from, one of the white folks that we, because, we always spend X amount of time, trying to figure out, so we say like all white folks are bad. So then we got to figure out which of them aren't, so instead of spending that time trying to figure that out, we don't have to do that in this case because it wasn't goodwill and well-intentioned. We established this celebration of us. They kind of co-opted, right? And so that's what we need you to know is that
interest conversions.
Interest conversions. And that is who, my brother?
Dr. Derek Bell and a number of other a number of women and a bunch of other folks.
And so they don't do things. So in short, they don't do things. The things that look like they do for us is for them. And so we sign on because we're like, oh, thank you. But in reality, it's for them. And so they do things with us. And I don't say that because they don't even be for us. They do things like with, and not like we be doing it together, like we be used. Like they use us to get their agendas passed. So that's interest convergence. And I'll give you an example of that. And so so we already know, we know about the disparity in the awarding of the PPP loans, right? Right. And so
and not only the awarding of them, but the dollar amounts as well.
And the dollar amounts as well, right? So it looks like this, right?
Right.
And so, and then we know all of these people who wasn't supposed to get no loans, they got the loans, right? They got all the white folks, right? Joe Biden comes, forgives all the loans, right?
Yeah.
Yay! So essentially, you gave all of those rich people all that tax dollars
Mhm.
free. It's wealth transfer,
Mhm.
right? So those same white folks who say we, you know, like we can't have reparations, we can't, anything that we get is at the expense of everybody, right?
Mhm.
Anything that we get. But ain't none of the white folks who ain't had no business with the PPP loans to start with, ain't none of them say, oh no, President, allow us, please. This is the government's money. No, that's not what happened. You know, there's at least one organization. I was actually listening to NPR, and they was talking to this guy, this businessman, and he was like, you know, and actually he had paid before the forgiveness piece, and so but they are asking him, and he's like, we kind of anticipated that it was going to be a forgiveness, but um, in good faith, we thought we needed to get the money back because it was a loan, and so we paid it all back. And so then she asks, so if you would have still been paying at the time of forgiveness, what do you think you would have done? And he said, well, I'm sure it's easy to say now because we had already paid, but my thought is that we still would have given it back because that's why we gave it back anyway, because we thought that that was the right thing to do. We used the money for why we needed it. We are fine. We're flush. This is the country's money, but that's not what most people did. And then somebody's listening. They were like, well, black people didn't either. Okay, but it looks like this. So giving them all that money and giving us the little money you gave us, even once you forgive it, we've gained no ground. There's no relative benefit in the marketplace for us. Now, it certainly helped somebody. I'm not saying
Certainly,
it didn't,
certainly
but
help.
there was no ground gained.
Right. Zero sum game.
Yes.
Zero sum game, no doubt about it. And the prosecutions for those the fraud, who's the face of that?
Looks like us.
And that does not even, and from my understanding, I had a very frank conversation with the prosecutor, federal prosecutor. The prosecutor told me that the level of fraud associated with the PPP loan program is unprecedented in this country's history.
And black folks just steadily getting arrested.
And we're steadily getting arrested. We're the face of it. If you didn't know any better, we were the only ones getting those loans. Well, I shouldn't say we, but black folks are
Mm-hmm.
only ones making fraudulent loans. But that is not that's not the case.
That's
That's
not the
not
case.
the case. You've
I
seen
mean, Tom Brady got a loan, so we know it's fraudulent, right?
cool. Right. Right.
And
And,
so,
and he's playing in a celebrity golf tournament out at Pebble Beach this week. So we see how much the prosecutor is up under his skin.
I'm like, my goodness. So that's the month. And so I wanted to touch on something else before we get out of here. Last week we were talking about letter from Birmingham jail, and then we ended up talking about the March on Washington for jobs and freedom. And again, how when we're not in control of the narrative, we lose, literally. And
Right.
so we have in the case of the March on Washington, we have people who think that that was about. First of all, we think that the march was about Dr. King. we think, we think that, and then second of all, we think that his speech was about a dream, and we think that the name of the speech was called the "I Have a Dream" speech, and that is not true. I believe the name of the speech is, I think, either "Normalcy No More" or "Normality No More," or something like that.
I call it I came to get my check speech.
And so his point in the title was that, we need to be disruptive. That was the point in his title. But the 15 or 20 minutes before the dream riff, he's talking about, a check mark, insufficient funds. So he's talking about the United States wrote a bad check. The march is an economic march. So again, all these folks, and I harp on this all the time because we say this stuff wrong. Dr. King certainly evolved over the years, but he didn't evolve into economics. Economics was always a part of his program. And so let's just stop doing that. And so, but we ended up talking about the letter from the Birmingham jail because that happened the previous spring. All right. And so Attorney Fields kind of laid that out. But I noted then that that wasn't the only letter from jail. Right. So you also had a letter from the Selma jail. And so I'll read it for you. Dear friends, when the King of Norway participated in awarding the Nobel Peace Prize to me, he surely did not think that in less than 60 days I would be in jail. He and almost all world opinion would be shocked because they are little aware of the unfinished business in the South. By jailing hundreds of Negroes, the city of Selma, Alabama, has revealed the persisting ugliness of segregation to the nation and the world. When the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, many decent Americans were lulled into complacency because they thought the day of difficult struggle was over. Why are we in jail? Have you ever been required to answer 100 questions on government, some abstruse and even to a political scientist specialist, merely to vote? Have you ever stood in line have you ever stood in line with over 100 others? And after waiting an entire day, seeing less than 10 given the qualifying test? This is Selma, Alabama. There are more Negroes in jail with me than there are on the voting rolls. But apart from voting rights, merely to be a person in Selma is not easy. When reporters asked Sheriff Clark if a woman defendant was married, he replied, "She's a nigger woman, and she hasn't got a miss or a missus in front of her name." This is the USA in 1965. We are in jail simply because we cannot tolerate these conditions for ourselves or our nation. We need the help of all decent Americans. Our organization, SELC, is not only working in Selma, Alabama, but in dozens of other Southern communities. Our self-help projects operate in South Carolina, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, and other states. Our people are eager to work, to sacrifice, to be jailed, but their income, normally meager, is cut off in these crises. Your help can make the difference. Your help can be a message of unity with the thickest jail wall, which the thickest jail walls cannot muffle. With warmest good wishes from us all. Now, that's a letter from a Selma jail. What that was is a mass appeal. That was in, I believe, the New York Times. Yes, that was printed in the New York Times on February 5th. And it was a mass appeal, mass marketing, right? Fundraising, organization. So that's the other thing that we often miss out on when we're talking about any of the movements, not just Dr. King, but any other movements. The amount of organizing that had to occur in order for these things to occur, for these things to happen, right? That is why we reintroduced the concept of the colored conventions, so that we see that our history of organizing predates emancipation.
Well, I'll give you a quick example. I'll give you a real quick example. This is from the We Charge Genocide. It's the exact same thing. And they charged that the year that this was sent before the UN,
51?
1951, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is 1951. We shall show more particularly how killing members of the group in violation of Article 2 of the Genocide Convention has been used to prevent the Negro people from voting in huge and decisive areas of the United States in which they are the preponderant population, thus dividing the whole American people, emasculating mass movements for democracy and securing the grip of predatory reaction on the federal, state, county, and city governments. Just wanted to, as we do what we do, pattern recognition. Just wanted to put that out there, Doc.
Yes, and again, I think it's trauma response. We have a need in the midst of this. Like when today gets overwhelming, we flee to the past. And we say things that just are patently false, right? So when we are struggling today, we be like, well, you used to be able to, you really ain't never really used to be able to do nothing in mass, right? That's just not true, right? So since the United States, just to give an example, we in that kind of economic space, there's never been a time since the United States government started keeping employment stats that this thing has been any better than 2-to-1 unemployment. Our unemployment rate is always twice as high, right? And and it's that now. It's that part doesn't change. This is kind of what it looks like. And so, but we harken back to these times. Okay, so when was it better? So it was better. It was better in '65 when he was writing his letter from the jail. Is that when it was better? Was it better in '63 when he was writing a letter from the jail? That's when it was better. Was it better in '51 when when that brother went before the UN to charge genocide?
Right.
When was it better? Was
Right.
it better? Was it better? Was it better in the what? When did Garvey come? In the 30s?
Right.
So was it better in the 30s when Garvey came?
Right.
When was it better? Right? Was it better in 1911 or 12 or whatever when the well-wishing white people tapped W.B. Du Bois on the shoulder and was like, come on, come with us, lead the Niagara movement and come with us and let's start the NAACP. It was better then? Was it better in the late 1800s when we were literally ousted from federal government? Right. When was it better? And so we look for these things. We go back to these times as if this stuff wasn't occurring. We know something was occurring. Why? Because we celebrate Dr. King. Why would we celebrate Dr. King if wasn't nothing happening? Why would we celebrate Malcolm if wasn't nothing happening? Why would we even know who W.B. Du Bois was if it wasn't nothing happening? Right? Why would we be talking about Carter G. Woodson today if it wasn't nothing happening? It ain't been no time when it was all good. Right? And so we have to come to grips with our history, which is part of the reason why we don't always read the right thing. Kind of this that's a sure enough sign of trauma. It's avoidance, right? And so avoidance avoidance and hypervigilance are they're the critical pieces that we have to look at. So like when the Negroes are scared to do something because Mr. Charlie might see them, that's kind of that hypervigilance thing. And when the Negroes don't do things because of I don't want to do that because it makes me feel certain. That's avoiding, right? And so those are two primary and principal kind of trauma reactions. But we gotta move beyond this. We gotta learn the information. We gotta share the information. We gotta move and have this fugitive pedagogy in much the same way that Dr. Woodson did, and the Black leadership before. The Black leadership that introduced the colored conventions in 1830 and held them annually, nationally and regionally on into, well into the 1890s. Those are shoulders that we stand on. And so when we're calling the ancestors, that's what they look like. That's who they are. Their works are available to us. We have to get those works. We got to eat it and digest it, spit it out.
And become it.
Yes,
yes. I'd just like to share a short piece from Dr. Woodson's Miseducation of the Negro. And he states as follows: why should the Negro wait for someone from without to urge him to self-assertion when he sees himself robbed by his employer, defrauded by his merchant, and hushed up by government agents of injustice? Why wait for a spur to action when he finds his manhood insulted, his woman outraged, and his fellow men lynched for amusement? The Negroes have always had sufficient reason for being radical, and it looks silly to see them tacking up the cause of others who pretend that they are interested in the Negro when they merely mean to use the race as a means to an end. When the desired purpose of these so-called friendly groups will have been served, they will have no further use for the Negro and will drop him just as the Republican machine has done. The radicals bring forward to the argument that the Negro, being of a minority group, will always be overpowered by others. From the point of view of the selfish elements, this may be true, and certainly it has worked thus for some time, but things do not always turn out according to mathematical calculations. In fact, the significant developments in history have never been thus determined. Only the temporary and the trivial can be thus forecast. The human factor is always difficult for the materialist to evaluate, and the prophecies of the alarmist are often upset. Why should we expect less in the case of the Negro?
And that's from where?
That is from the Miseducation of the Negro.
So it's not, it's about the implications of the miseducation. That's really what the book is about, right?
Yes, it is.
And it's, again, it's a cross contextual book. It's much more.
It's a blueprint.
Yes.
It's a blueprint for. He tries. If I will, he deals with every specific profession that matters. He talked about insurance salesmen. He talked about grocers. He talked about educators. But go ahead, Doc. I'm tempted to read his statement to this educator that he cited. But go ahead, Doc. I'll find it while you're talking.
No, that was my point. Just you go ahead. And like I said, my point was simply going to be though, we have to read the book. People off-cite it, but oftentimes cite it. But I just don't know that people are reading this book. Miseducation of the Negro. It, as attorney Fields is saying, it's a blueprint, and it gives you a snapshot for what was going on then and how the educational structures as they were at that time were impacting Black folks. And so just like we are talking about, whatever our relative thoughts are about the education system now, this is what motivated Carter G to do what he ultimately did, and then gave birth and gave rise to Negro History Week and Negro History Month or Black History Month or African American History Month, whatever you want to call it. That's how all this came to be. It was the fight for, self-identification and, historical reality. Go ahead, brother.
And he was far more conservative. Actually, he placed more on us than I think King did, because of course King felt that the government had a role in providing for the well-being of Black folks, just like it had done, or as King says, you undergirded America's white peasant with home and land grants and so forth. King felt we did, but Carter G. Woodson felt like they didn't owe us anything except leave us alone. Those of you all that we want to collaborate with, we should. But his whole mission was, you have enough. But that came from reading the newspaper to coal miners that could not read in West Virginia, but would gather around him as story time because they wanted to be up on things. And as a young man, he would read the newspaper to them. That love and self-determination came from those deep roots.
And so, are you saying that he was ultimately able to go to school and, you know, get go to school, get his, his early education, and then become a teacher, and then go off to where did he go? He went to Harvard. Is that where he went?
He went to University. What's funny, University of Chicago undergrad and master. Then he got his PhD from Harvard. I think
And
he is the only son of an enslaved individual ever to graduate from Harvard.
and so in the midst of all of that, he worked in a coal mine too. Is that what you're saying?
I,
That,
I have the ignorance to say that. Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
yeah, it's a bad man.
He was a bad man, just like
In
me,
some hard times.
in some hard
He
times.
was a bad man in some hard times. He gives accounts of Red Summer. You know, he gives accounts of being on the street in the midst of it and having to take cover. He he's the goods.
He is the
He,
good. I'll read this, Doc, and we'll hear your opinion on it. And we will close for the day. But from I'm going to I'll start here. The large majority of persons supposedly teaching Negroes never carry to the schoolroom any thought as to improving their condition. From the point of view of these so-called teachers, they have done their duty when in automaton fashion. He keeps me in my this is one guy you have to have your phone with to look up the definitions. And I
the computer with you.
take pictures of them and keep them in my vocabulary. But automaton fashion, they impart in the schoolroom the particular facts which they wrote out in the examination when they qualified for their respective positions. Most of them are satisfied with receiving their pay and spending it for toys. And here's one of those words right here. I had to look this word up. Gigas of life. Have you ever look? I'll stop and look and gigas of life are shiny things with no value. They're essentially shiny things of no value. But I digress. For example, the author is well acquainted with a Negro of this type, who is now serving as the head of one of the largest schools in the United States. From the point of view of our present system, he is well educated. He holds advanced degrees from one of the leading institutions of the world, and he is known to be well informed on all the educational theories developed from the time of Socrates down to the day of Dewey. Yet this educator says repeatedly that in his daily operations, he never has anything to do with Negroes because they are impossible. He says that he never buys anything from a Negro store, and he would not dare put a penny in a Negro bank. From such teachers, large numbers of Negroes learn this fateful lesson. For example, not long ago, a committee of Negroes in a large city went to the owner of a chain store in their neighborhood and requested that he put a Negro manager in charge. This man replied that he doubted that Negroes themselves wanted such a thing. The Negroes urging him to make the change assured him that they were unanimously in favor of it. The management, however, asked them to be fair enough with his firm and themselves to investigate before pressing the matter any further. They did so and discovered that 137 Negro families in that neighborhood seriously objected to the buying from Negroes and using articles handled by them. These Negroes then had to do the groundwork of uprooting the inferiority idea which had resulted from their miseducation.
Education. Yes, brother. And I mean, he's speaking of, he's literally speaking of blackface, right?
Yeah.
So, so we have those amongst us, you know, charged with, you know, the care of us and have disdain for us, right? And but that's what happens when you're miseducated, as he so eloquently states, right? So when you're miseducated, you don't do good for the people. And it's really just that simple. But read the book for yourself and get some of that. And when you're done with that, read let's see. He's got another good book. Got another book. I think it's like it's not coming up. It's
Well,
like the
the
education of the Negro.
the education of the Negro prior to 1861.
That
Yeah, you mentioned that before. I have that. I purchased that after you mentioned that before.
that yes, the education of the Negro prior to 1861. It's a great book, and it speaks to what we had to do to get educated, right? And so this, education is a good barometer for kind of tracking the nature of our relationship with the enemy. And and we should be forever indebted to Carter G. Woodson for laying these things out. Um, and in that book, there are other names that you probably heard before, but didn't really have a great appreciation or understanding or awareness or what have you of what it took for them to become the recognizable name. That's kind of what ends up in that book. Him talking about the various movements that Black folks established for education, and and the various things that Black folks had to do to access those resources. So it's a great book. Great book. Add that to your reading list. And so next week, I think we need to jump back in on some Negro, some colored conventions. Um, uh, don't know which year we'll go. I mean, we did the first two, and then we jumped ahead. So I'll look and see what the third one is. Maybe we'll do the third one, or definitely I'll find one that the content is, very closely aligned to what we're living with today, to kind of show that continuity. And again, the purpose of revisiting the Negro conventions is not just to make sure that folks knew that they happened, but we have to see and understand the continuity in the agenda hasn't changed.
It's
The
not.
agenda for us has always been the same. And so, one of the ways that I've grown to recognize friend from folk is that if I'm in a room with Black folks who look like me, and somebody say we need an agenda, I'm a little leery of that person. I, and definitely depending on how loud they say it, like literally, like how loud and how aggressive that they say it. But I tend to think those people are provocateurs, agent provocateurs. They're plants. They're people who go into these spaces to rile up the folks, to kind of get them set up, and so because if you're a person who really does that, like if you're a person who is an organizer, you're a Black organizer, I'm thinking you know about the, you know, the color conventions, and you know about our legacy of organizing, and you know the continuity between the various movements and the various manifestos. You know that there are going to be some striking similarities. When you look at 1830 versus when you look in, in let's say in 1965, 1966, when you look at the program, the Black Panther program, you're gonna see continuity between those two manifestos. So when you got somebody standing in the midst of you talking about we need an agenda, that brother or sister is a plant. Now they can certainly just be ignorant, but you got to steer clear of them regardless, because the record is pretty clear. We just have to access it, right? And the other reason why we do it is because it shows the organization, it shows the solidarity, it clearly shows the sacrifice that free Black people were, were living, the living sacrifice that the free Black people were doing to organize at a time where, there was, there was liberty, they were living liberty at that organizing at that time was literally a death sentence. And so not only were they organizing, they were printing and disseminating information at that time, right? And so we really have to appreciate that work. And again, see the continuity all the way down. The arguments that, like even today, you still hear people, who was right, Du Bois or Booker T. Most people have no idea the nature of that relationship, first of all, right? Most people have no idea that amongst the first people to congratulate Booker T after the Atlanta Exposition was W.B. Du Bois. Said something to the extent of words well said. He agreed with him. You fast forward to, his last public interview with Ralph McGill, Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He says it. We didn't really disagree. That's what Du Bois said. He said, we didn't really disagree. Our followers disagree, which has been the truth, is that it's everybody after them who don't understand. But like you can go on the Amherst website and access Du Bois's papers. There's scores of letters of correspondence between he and Booker T. And I'm not saying that they agreed on everything. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that they agreed on a lot of things and they had an enduring relationship, But my point of bringing them up was that debate didn't start with them. That debate you can also find, in the color convention minutes. What manner of education? Right. So how are we going to be trained?
And the way Black folks were supposed to handle themselves. The
yes,
color
all of those things are in.
They went down to the point where they said, we're not even to refer to white folks as ma'am and sir anymore. That's in the convention. We don't do that. Every aspect of subservience has to be eradicated. They said, I don't care if you're in court. You don't refer to them as ma'am and sir anymore. Say judge.
And it provided it will also help you to get out of this thing. Again, this is the system. This system isolates our leadership. system will have you believe that Dr. King exists in isolation.
Right.
Right. The system will have you believe that Frederick Douglass existed in isolation.
That's correct.
Right.
Correct.
You know, there's a context for all of these brothers and all these sisters. And so that's why we got to read that and, you know, bring it forward and steadily tie in these movements and ultimately get, you know, to our current circumstance. So again, we know that there is a pattern. We have to recognize it and we have to access it. You know, all of it ain't good. So
No.
you look at it and you look and see what works, what didn't work, and the things that didn't work, try to figure out why they didn't work. And if there's, you know, if there's some utility in that. Now, if it can't be, you know, if there are things in there that can't be reconciled, that's cool too. Then you know what? Don't try that. Don't try that. But some of those other things, if it worked then, it'll probably work now. We got to be committed to it. Of course, we got to update it if necessary, but we don't have to spend time, you know, stating the obvious. Oh, they just don't want us to learn. That's the nature of the resistance.
Right.
So they just don't want a white man a black man in leadership. They don't want that sister to have that. Okay. That's the nature of the relationship.
That's right.
That's the playbook.
That's right.
All right. So what we gonna run? You know, so that's we see how they lined up.
Right.
What we gonna run?
Right.
And so we got to go back into the annals. We got to talk to the ancestors to see what we do in the wake of the onslaught.
Right. But it couldn't be better said. And the point of that isolation, putting those folks in that isolation, is to make each individual feel as if they can't do it.
They can't do it, right?
And that's not the truth. Everybody under the sound of our voice right now, fully capable of being fully actuated and understand that. And you don't have to take it from me. Dr. Alexander is a clinical psychologist. He'll tell you himself.
Yeah, what the attorney said.
Well, we want to thank you all for joining the Level Set. This has been pedagogical. This has been pedagogical for me, I know, and we hope it has been for you as well. We hope, you know, with God's will, we'll see you next week. We want to most definitely send wishes out to Joe Madison's family. What a phenomenal man. You know, he went to WashU?
I did.
Yeah, he went to WashU right here in St. Louis, and just a phenomenal stalwart. In addition to that, Carl Weathers' family, Action Jackson was, man, oh man, that was a highlight.
Carl Weathers was just in Chicago last week. He was on the morning news last week.
Wow, it goes fast, bro. I mean, nothing is guaranteed. And I don't take a minute of this life for granted. I thank God for every second. I do. And I thank God for you as well, Dr. Alexander.
Thank you, brother. And I the same.
And we look forward to seeing you all, if it's God's will, next week.